Hello, welcome to today's show. I'm Jacqueline Stockwell, CEO and founder at Leadership Through Data. I inspire and motivate information leaders across the world.
I am here with Andrea McIntosh. Kia ora, everybody. I'm Andrea McIntosh, Principal Consultant Leadership Through Data, based in New Zealand, currently in the UK with Jackie and the rest of the Leadership Through Data team. So I have over 25 years experience in both information management technology. My big goals are empowering everybody to feel good about what they're doing in both spaces, and just empowering people to be brave and bold and do the best that we can, go out and strive for excellence. Amazing, thank you. And I'm so pleased, yes, you are in the UK, and we're doing this as a in a face-to-face environment, so it's quite exciting. So we've recently been to the ARA, so the Archives and Records Association conference in Bristol last week. It was really nice to kind of go together. We did a presentation. Do you want to talk about that for me? Yeah, it was amazing to be on site in Bristol, actually, Jackie. Fantastic experience, and I'm really grateful for the experience. So the topic that we talked about was the future of AI and information and archives management as well. So one of the, we did a lot of talking about not so much the technical aspects of it, because, tech, you can go and research that as much as you like, but it's about being brave and giving things a go. One of the things I also talked about is look behind us. Take that opportunity to look in the rear view mirror as we're screaming down that highway, because looking behind us allows us to see where we've come from. So see some of the challenges that we, perhaps resourcing or budget that was a challenge for us in the past, and we can lean into artificial intelligence and some of those tools to make it less of a challenge moving forward. So the talk centered around more of that rather than the actual tech, and using it to do greater things with what we've got. Yeah, and I really liked the kind of the play that we did together, because you kind of brought all the sort of like really fine knowledge around AI and Microsoft 365, and then we did some engagement activities. So we got everybody to do an alphabet spaghetti, which was your idea. And we accelerated that to making the audience shout out what terminology was around AI. So we had AI, machine learning, we had automated robotic processing, and NLP, so natural language processing. And I kind of really liked the way that the audience kind of got involved, and they were sort of shouting out the answers, and they were able to win a copy of my latest international best-selling book, Blooming Good Information Management. One of the key takeaways that I think came from that session was the drill. You had an image of the drill. Do you want to tell me about the drill? Yeah, so I had an image of a drill. Quite a strange thing to have in a presentation around records management. Normally we keep drills away from records. But the analogy that I was using there is, when you're thinking about what you're wanting to do, you're actually thinking about the whole. You're not thinking about the drill. So when you're using power tools such as a drill, you're not actually thinking about what the drill does. You're thinking about the size of the hole. Is it in masonry? Before you actually pick up that power drill. So that's what we need to be doing when we're thinking about AI tools. Don't get too hung up on the tool itself. And as Jackie said, we had a game of alphabet spaghetti. Don't get too hung up on all the alphabet that comes along with AI. Just think about what it is that you're actually wanting to achieve. So how big a hole? Is it in wood? Is it in masonry? And then find the right tool. Amazing. And then you look at the AI to that. So I love that. You also had a couple of other analogies around. So you can't catch a crayfish from the shore. What's that about? Tell me. Yeah, so that saying comes from Aotearoa, New Zealand, where I was born and live. And it's around, don't sit there dreaming of the crayfish from the shore. You're never going to catch it. So if you sit on the shore and think, oh, I really crayfish right now, or lobster, as I believe you say over here in the UK, probably the US as well, you're never going to get that. You need to get your feet wet. You need to get out into that water and start seeking that crayfish or lobster, and that's the only way that you're going to get it. So don't sit there dreaming. get out there and get amongst it and start looking for those opportunities to catch that crayfish.
Yeah, I really, really liked that analogy. So our talk focused on the idea of being much more proactive. So in your experience, what's a common example of an organisation or individual trying to catch a crayfish from at the shore?
Yeah, so I'll share an experience that I've had in a local government setting. So, there was a lot going on. There was a lot going on in the world of ICT. So, big data was coming along. There was some, sort of that Bitcoin thinking was coming along. Changes that need to happen around business processes being more automated. Internet of Things was coming on board, and we had a lot of stakeholders in that mix. What we did is we established a ICT think tank, or an ICT think tank. So these were all the stakeholders. Some of them hadn't touched tech ever, apart from their business as usual, getting their job done, typing up their memo. What we did is we brought them together and then took them out for a day to a technical leadership sort of day camp. Tech Futures was what it was called. And we went there and we played with tech. We got some HoloLens glasses. We immersed ourselves in just some of that potential around technology. What that did, what it achieved, is it got everybody excited about it. Instead of just saying, this is coming, you don't know what it looks like, but get ready. It was actually turned around to, this is coming. Feel it, touch it, get ready, and start thinking about how it's going to change our environment. So one of the outcomes of that was one of our wastewater people had a go at that immersive goggle lens tech for looking at pipelines and that. Get out there and get off the shore, really.
I love that. I love that. So we're talking from drills to crayfish, and now we're going to talk about the importance of getting your hands dirty, kind of really understanding the problem from inside out. So is there a specific, I can never say that word, if you know or if you follow me on LinkedIn, a project or experience from your career where this approach is absolutely critical to a successful outcome?
Yeah, so I've got a big background in IT, so proof of concept, or POC labs as they're sometimes called, is ring fencing and giving things a go in a very safe, low risk environment. So taking those opportunities to do those proof of concepts, talk to your ICT people. So one of the proof of concepts I have done in the past is around data. It's actually a cool story. I'm going to share it. So I used to work in tech for a grapevine nursery. So I used to do all the data logging and that to look after grapevines that make wine. And some thinking was around pulling up the black plastic, when it got too hot where the grapevines were growing. And so there was a bit of an aha moment, like, what if instead of pulling all that plastic up, we just painted that plastic white instead of replacing plastic with white plastic. So I'm all about the environment as well. So ring fenced it, did a proof of concept, got someone to go through and paint a row with white paint, and looked at the data and looked at the success of that and took away the emotion and got some decision support happening that it was going to be a success, and then rolled it out from there.
Fantastic. I love that. So what's one piece of advice you can give to somebody who wants to move beyond simply observing a problem and start diving in and getting their hands really dirty?
Learn. So take all those opportunities to learn. And I'm not just talking about structured learning here. I'm talking about that thought leadership, that critical thinking learning. Follow people on LinkedIn who this is what they do all day. They're passionate about AI. Even if it's not in the record space, there's some really great things happening in AI and health that we can then translate into an archives or a record setting. Do that learning. Talk to your ICT people. Get an environment. Find some way to get an environment, create an environment where you can learn quite safely and give these things a go. The more you touch them, the more you play with them, the better you're going to be equipped to know what you didn't know and then go and find.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd highly recommend hands-on training. It definitely helps cement your knowledge. And once you've done it once, it helps you to navigate it in the kind of future. So it's not a, oh, I learned that and then forgotten that. Where could they learn? So you've talked about, I know in our talk we talked about Microsoft Learn. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, so Microsoft Learn has a lot of resources around the Azure AI platform. Obviously here at Leadership Through Data, we do training sessions as well that talk about Copilot and some of those more forward-facing, so your user-facing AI tools and the records management perspective of those. But when it comes to those back-end technologies, I would recommend go on Microsoft Learn. And even if it's just starting to learn that language, you're just starting to learn what's possible. And then you can take it from there as to there's lots of paths to go down there, Jackie. So we talked about that alphabet soup. The same thing happens. It's a bigger soup of products and what they can do within that Azure stack. At least have a look at it and learn what you want to dive through further.
And it can be, when you're learning kind of new content, it can be quite overwhelming because there's so much to learn. And I think like books are really good resources. As you said, Leadership Through Data does a lot of things. Following people on LinkedIn, I think is great. It's free advice. But it's also trying to navigate the best thing for you and your organisation as well. And that's definitely something, as you said, Leadership Through Data can facilitate for you. So that was the kind of last question on ARA. And I kind of want to talk about the ISO standards because you're part of that committee. So could you just explain what you do first, and then I can ask you some questions around that after?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about the standards. So I'm the convener for the International Review Group for Record Keeping Standards in New Zealand. Bit of a mouthful, so we just shorten that to the IRG in New Zealand. So we're a mirror committee for ISO standards. So the committee that creates the 15489, which is our foundational records management standard. One of the things, so I think you talked about this in the panel at ARA as well, Jackie, around, some of the complications around the words and how big the standards are and how can we actually get our heads around the full stack of standards. One of the things that I am a believer in is, don't shove the whole standards in front of people and expect them to read it. What we need to be doing is understanding these standards and also understanding our audience for the standards. If we want to talk to our risk management people, there's risk management standards related documents that we can talk to them about. If we want to talk to our enterprise architects, there's enterprise architects records management documents through ISO that we can talk to those architects about. And all of these link back to our foundational standards. So our 15489, which if you've worked in records management for a while, you will be very with those numbers put together. I'm proud to say that the 2016 version of that standard was actually approved in New Zealand.
Amazing. Amazing. Two questions on that. What is a convener for the listeners?
Yeah, so as a convener, basically I chair the New Zealand group. I've got an amazing team that put in mahi. So mahi is in New Zealand what we call work. So a lot of mahi from New Zealand goes into developing these standards and also raising the profile of standards use in New Zealand. So one of our, we've recently become an incorporated society, and that's going to enable us to seek funding and support New Zealand to better use these standards. One of the problems that we've got, one of the challenges that we've got in our standards world in records management is that there's no commercial basis for it that's quite obvious. So if you think about an ISO standard for, let's say, for example, heater safety, everybody who manufactures heaters is going to contribute to the development of that standard because it's price point. They can say that they're ISO certified. For records management, we don't have those price points. We don't have that commercial way of selling our standards. So what we're going to do as a committee is find ways to better uplift and better outreach the use of standards.
Amazing. Amazing. And the other question that I had for you was around, so the standards are there, they're international standards. Does everybody adhere to them? Are they a requirement for organisations to?
Yeah, so there are standards. If people are familiar with the 9000 series, which is the quality kind of standard, we don't have those in our committee. So there's no real prescriptive or, standards that you can say that, in New Zealand specifically, I'm talking here, that we can actually be audited against. That it's not as powerful as that, but the key message is we shouldn't need that to follow standards, right? These standards, a lot of effort goes into them, and it's around us as records people not trying to sell the standard as it's written, but sell the benefit of the standard. If we use the standard, if we implement, records management and systems, implementing that is going to save us time, money, effort, and risk.
Yeah, agreed. And I think it's really important that it's that excellence, isn't it? So you fight for excellence in standards compliance, for excellence rather than it's the law and you must comply. It's one of those, things that is that once you've achieved it, then it's an excellent standard for you. One of the things that I struggle with is the accessibility of standards. So as you know, I'm dyslexic and I have ADHD, so I have attention. And I struggle to read them or sit down and try and digest them. Are they available in any other formats?
So yeah, having a conversation with you, Jackie, the other day around the standards, I appreciate what you're saying there. One of the things that I said to you was within our committee, we do have a visual way of looking at those standards. So I would recommend reaching out to myself or another member and getting hold of that visual. We actually have a LinkedIn group as well. So reach out to me. I can send you a link to that LinkedIn group. If you're going to be talking about these standards, so one of the things I've said to Jackie that I'll do for her is just give you some high-level executive sort of summaries of the standards and paint a picture as opposed to the words and the very wordy documents. Again, it comes down to your stakeholders. Right now, Jackie is my stakeholder in this conversation, so I'm going to be, putting it into a framework that is good for her and will help her understand the different landscape as well.
Amazing, thank you. Well, thank you, Andrea, so much for your time today. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners before we finish the session?
Just want to say thanks, really, particularly for those who I met at the ARA conference. It was an incredible experience. One of the things that really was eye-opening for me was New Zealand is quite a young country compared to what I'm seeing over here. And speaking with the archivists in particular and those doing, archival preservation, there's just the incredible collections and the incredible number of years that you're dealing with over here. And yeah, some really powerful conversations that I loved every night.
Amazing. And we loved having you. So I absolutely concur with that. Massive shout out to the ARA conference for delivering such a fantastic session. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And speak to you soon.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you for listening to the Journals of the Information Entrepreneur with me, Jacqueline Stockwell. I hope you found this episode inspiring and helpful and have some takeaway tips that can be useful to you. If you liked this episode, please like, review and share it with your friends. Your support helps us reach more information leaders to stay inspired and listen to great content. Want to test out your strengths and weaknesses and measure it against our Empower framework? Please complete the scorecard. It's a great way to improve and evaluate your skills. You can find the scorecard at the end of the description of this podcast. Stay tuned for a new podcast every Thursday and remember to be bold, be brave and be beautiful.